My name, as has been said, is Sandile Songca. I'm from the University of Zululand. And I would like to speak today about the FYE from an historic perspective, but also from an teaching and learning perspective. I was sharing with somebody earlier today how I note that organizationally the FYE is really a student support services affair. Although organizational permutations vary. And I'm trying at UniZulu to appropriate it to the teaching and learning division, but in so doing, not dispossess the student support services division. I am thankful for the invitation to this conference. It comes at a time when the higher education sector is highly concerned about this first-year transitions. We are very worried about students, that will they cope with their first-year studies and be successful? Will they stay? Will they perform well in their studies or drop out? But of more concern to most of us, especially those that are gray-haired like me, is whether they will fall victim to vulnerabilities such as drugs, HIV, pregnancy, crime, hunger, prostitution, and yes, death. We have lost, in the sector, we're losing between 0.001 and 0.002 of our students. That means roughly if you are a university of 40,000 students, you might be losing up to 40 students per year. Might be 40 students dying in your university. Now we all know that the first year of university has many transitions that can overwhelm and defeat students if they are not managed. And as a result, universities put in place programs to manage these transitions so that students are not too stressed, they're not quit, and they're successful academically and in other ways, because they have come to learn and also to be people. We generally refer to this as the first year experience, which is generally part of the total student experience, focusing on the critical first year. It is therefore the university's responses to the problem of students getting too highly stressed in their first year, giving up, quitting, or falling victim to vulnerabilities as a way of coping. We do know, for instance, that many of our students, particularly the girls, don't want us to bury our heads in the sand on this one. They do go out at night. And it's if we bury our heads in the sand on that one, we are actually relegating a very serious responsibility. Now this features as well in the quality enhancement project, as you know, where some of the transitions are highlighted there, and it is stressed that the curricula should identify these transitions and help students to successfully navigate them and cope with them as part of the enhancement of the total student experience, and for the first time entering students as part of the FYE. There's a bit of history to the FYE. It's not very accurate because people in the FYE are not so much concerned about researching its history. They are very much interested, we are very much interested in using the tools of the FYE to improve the efficiencies of educational systems, particularly the higher educational systems. So allow me to skip that. The content, though, of the earlier approaches and the pedagogies thereto are of some interest. In the early days, the FYE was actually defined in terms of a course, a credit-bearing module, and there's some of that still endures in the FYE today. The multiple purposes of the FYE included student success that is still with us, retention is still with us, and well-being. But back then there were other ulterior motives, such as institutional expansion of success, and in some cases, expansion of incomes. This first year seminar started as a small enrollment course to help beginning students with their academic and social transitions in many institutions. The course was run throughout the first year. Like the life orientation, if you like. In many South African universities today, the features of these interventions can still be found, but they take various forms, from once-off to a year-long non-credit-bearing engagement with students in a variety of engagements and services. If we can come back to South Africa, you find that the most problematic area is the transitions in the first year, particularly the transition between school and university, where exceptionally high dropouts are observed. This stats was given earlier by Dr. Van Zyl, and it is this alarming stats that says to us clearly, unfortunately, our higher education system is inefficient. We cannot bury our heads in the sand on this one. Our higher education system is inefficient. It's not a criticism of the academics, it's not a criticism of the Department of Higher Education, it's not a criticism of anyone, just a statement of fact. So we are sitting with a higher education system that is inefficient. We want to move it to a state in which it is quite efficient. Secondly, I spoke earlier about the organizational arrangements of the first year experience, which to me is the most powerful tool. It's one of the most powerful tools, let me put it that way, that we can use to transform the system from an inefficient one to an efficient one. So I say analysis shows that establishment of dedicated first year experience organizations staffed and resourced to provide both the service and ongoing support for students is a very important feature of the FYE in South Africa today. But there are some things that need to be strengthened within this enterprise in South Africa, such as the monitoring, the tracking, the reporting, and the improvement cycle. I don't think colleagues were looking for one super intelligent academic to come up with a silver bullet in FYE. What we want, or what we are really engaged in, all of us, is a concise and concerted improvement. I don't want to use the word gradual, because I don't want, personally, I'm not hoping that the improvement will be gradual. On the other hand, I'm hoping that it will be quick. But what we really ought to be doing is incremental improvement of the system and building of the critical indigenous knowledge of that improvement to reach a very high retention and success, and therefore increase in the efficiency of the system. One of the critical interventions is the identification and management of the student risk that typically causes students to fail and to stress too much and drop out. So this whole business of students at risk is one of the core issues in the FYE. The notion of students' risk is becoming increasingly important as a predictor of student stress on campus. The simplified argument here is that dropouts are results of stress. Now, although this is a simplified argument, it holds the practically usable principle that it is possible to track the levels of coping among students, to actually predict and track the levels of stress among students, so that these can be arrested before they cause failure and dropout. If this can happen, I do believe that we would have taken the enterprise a long way forward. I was in Japan and also in China, where actually the problems of throughput are either minimal or trivial. You in China in particular, in some university, you go to university, you pass, and throughput is 100%. You know, they don't have these problems that we have here. And we then wonder, how can we achieve efficient systems like that? What are some of the factors that contribute to students approaching levels of stress beyond which they drop out? What causes students to be at high dropout risk? Some of the factors that put students at risk are identified by Hammond, include demographics, early adult responsibilities, attitudes, values, behaviors, low academic preparedness, and so on. But Hammond makes a point that it is not one single factor. It is generally most of these factors working together. In South Africa, universities, like a number of universities abroad, are embracing the use of student data analytics as an important tool that can be used in a variety of ways to achieve the objectives of student retention and success. What I want to argue here today is that data analytics can be used wisely also for the specific objective of identifying students at risk from multiple data sources in line with the view of Hammond et al., so as to put measures in place to ameliorate the risk. We postulate that students profiling using combination of pre-university entrance data, in other words, the data we get from the application forms, early performance assessment, such as benchmark tests and your first assessment, can be used to identify students at risk with a high degree of accuracy, and this can happen early enough for remedial and corrective action to take place. Significance of this proposal is that the remedial and corrective action would typically target the student that is going to drop out. And hopefully, in fact, let me not say hopefully, effectively prevent that student from dropping out. The student that is going to fail and prevent that student from failing. The student that is going to expose themselves to vulnerabilities and prevent such occurrences. There's also the book that I read by Shelley Wells, which distinguishes between institutional factors, community factors, and family factors that contribute to this problem. Some of the Shelley Wells institutional factors are listed here. There are many, such as disregard of individual student learning style, social cohesion and racism, curriculum issues. I'm going to talk particularly today about large classes, and I'm going to talk about also data analytics, as I have mentioned. Some of the examples of Shelley Wells' community factors include community support, community linkages, criminality, unsafe neighborhoods, high unemployment, and exploitation of youth, including sex trafficking, etc. Examples of the family and home factors include low socioeconomic status, numerous family responsibilities, no parental involvement, domestic violence, high mobility, homelessness, little opportunity for learning outside school, and low educational attainment from the home. Many of these above three categories feature strongly, as you know, in the literature on the first-year experience and on student access, retention, and success, as evidenced by many research papers. In this presentation, I shall focus on large classes and the use of student data and learning analytics on how to ameliorate the impact of high risk. I did speak earlier about the organization of the FYE office. In many cases, it designs, prepares, schedules, and influences the support of first-year student successes through the delivery of programs, resources, special events, and service designed to promote student engagement. The office collaborates with stakeholders on and off campus to create programs that positively impact on first-year students. These programs include new student orientation, welcome week, and so on. There are many discrepancies and wide variations on the organization of the office in South Africa and in other universities. The office can be seen in a real sense as one of the true expressions of institutional student culture. I say this because this office focuses on the students and the threats to the students on the one hand, and focuses on the engagement of students, what students actually do on campus in order to be on track. And in so doing, creates the desired culture, and this office is constantly fighting the negative culture that is persistent on campuses. Many of us will recognize, I'm glad that it's much more clearer on the screen. On mine, it's less clear. It's much better now. Many of us will recognize this sequence of events that is happening on our campuses, although there may be variations. Typically, at our campus, we start from the student profiling, and then we go into the FYE year-long program. But we need to strengthen this side of things, this bar on the side. The data collection, the monitoring and evaluation, which will enable us to document what is happening with the FYE so that at the end of each cycle, we can be able to reflect on it and see where we can improve for the following year. This is why I was saying earlier, incremental improvement of the FYE, I think, would be the right path for us, so that when we say this year we suffered, let's say, 23% dropouts, and it came from these factors. We deal with those factors and see how we improve that by 3% in the following year from 23 to 20, the following year from 20 to 17, and so on. If we drive it as just a business of the year without the M&E, the improvement planning and the reflection, it is just business as usual with no impact. A data analytics system is under construction at the University of Zululand, which will collect various forms of student data to integrate to a data warehouse from which the data can be used for existing informatic needs, as well as for data-driven first-year experience program. The purpose of the system is to enable predictive determination of students facing the risk of dropping out before they actually drop out. The system collects university entrance data, benchmark performance data, early academic assessment data, and so on and so on. Any data, any student data, no matter how irrelevant it might seem at the time of collection to student success, retention, and wellness, it must be collected and warehoused. Because when you're now sitting down to do the analysis, you might find, as you mine the data that appeared to be irrelevant at the time is now suddenly useful for improving the FYE. Collecting the data and building a data house of increasing complexity is therefore the center of designing, planning, and implementing the first-year experience program that responds to student stress needs and remedial and corrective action for those students facing dropping out. You will have recognized that this is one part of this, this is a part of the Phumelela project that is also of increasing significance in South Africa. At the James Cook University, this is how they do it. But they don't drill deep into what actually happens in this area, the student experience. I suppose because it is an evolving IP of theirs. I want to give you a sneak preview of our own intellectually protected design, a model of data analytics management designed by the Strategic Analytics and Business Intelligence Office, where it shows a similar kind of data collection as you saw in the James Cook model that goes into warehousing and all the hardware storage that it makes it necessary to work for all users. And then it goes to a preparation stage for end users where it can then be available for reports, for analysis, and for decision making, especially in the improvement part where we sit and reflect on the data. You will see how it works here. We collect the data from all sources, and then we determine high-risk modules and students at risk, and then we design remedial and corrective action, and we implement it, and at the end of it, there is an improvement plan. Oops. Okay. Indeed, students, first-year students are overwhelmed by large classes. Large classes do have a great contribution to student stress. So I will rush straight into how we have designed a model for handling of large classes at the University of Zululand to make sure that students are properly engaged but are not so overwhelmed by large classes and then drop out. You will see here that The main feature in this cartoon are the ubiquitous use of teaching assistants and various technology displays. But the second feature of this is the chaining of classrooms. So we chain various venues. This can be very useful for multi-campus universities because you can chain classrooms across campuses for large classes. I know that in some universities, classes can be as large as 3,000. I think your economics class at UJ is about that much.